The Strait of Hormuz has been a ticking time bomb in the heart of the Middle East for decades. But what if I told you that bomb just got defused not by Washington, not by Beijing, but by the Gulf countries themselves, with their own steel and their own money? The smell of gunpowder in the Middle East is slowly dissipating. Yet, everyone is asking the same question. Will the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran still wields almost like a trump card, end completely? The Gulf monarchies, which have waited for years for a decisive saving intervention to emerge from the diplomatic tables of global powers, are now awakening to a painful and shocking truth: they must open the lock of the strait with their own means. The signatures thrown behind closed doors in Washington or Beijing are not enough to stop Tehran's missiles. The Strait of Hormuz continues to stand at the heart of the Middle East like a time bomb ready to explode at any moment. For this reason, the regional actors of the Gulf have decided to solve their own problems with their own budgets, building enormous alternative routes that will redraw the map rather than remain at the mercy of Iran. The UAE's bold bypass. The West-East pipeline. The United Arab Emirates is one of the countries that stands out the most regarding the routes that will bypass Hormuz. The UAE is not content with mere military deterrence. It is building a massive second bypass route to permanently remove the Hormuz trump card from Tehran's hand. The Habshan region, located in the interior of Abu Dhabi, is the focal point of this route. This is not an ordinary desert area, but a strategic central hub where the UAE's onshore oil production beats like a heart and where enormous reserves are brought to the surface. The safe delivery of the oil gushing from Habshan to the open seas is a vital necessity for Abu Dhabi's economic survival. A brand new enormous steel artery is being built starting from this massive oil production complex and extending all the way to the port of Fujairah on the coast of the Gulf of Oman. This project is called the West-East Pipeline. The UAE took the first step in this bypass vision with the first Habshan-Fujairah line, which began commercial operations in 2012. At that time, this first line, costing approximately $4 billion, was the clearest proof that the approaching storms and potential crises in Hormuz had been read well in advance. However, with Iran's effective closure of the strait in 2026, it was bitterly learned through experience that the 1.8 million barrels per day capacity of this first line would not be enough to shoulder the country's enormous production potential in times of crisis. This new line, brought to life by ADNOC's engineering genius and multi-billion-dollar budget, is not merely a pipeline infrastructure, it is a geopolitical rebellion. With an estimated cost of between $4 and $6 billion, the pipeline will traverse a challenging geography of exactly 146 kilometers, following a route parallel to the existing one without endangering its security. This enormous steel artery, which descends to the Gulf of Oman by crossing mountainous terrain and scorching deserts, is positioned as the most critical link in ADNOC's $55 billion mega-project package between 2026 and 2028. Abu Dhabi's Crown Prince, Sheikh Khaled bin Mohammed bin Zayed, has given the instruction that this project must be completed at all costs. This urgency demonstrates the UAE's determination to bypass Hormuz. What changes when the pipeline is completed? When the new line becomes operational, Fujairah's total export capacity will jump to 3.6 million barrels per day, creating an almost earthquake-like effect in global energy markets. This capacity increase will directly support the UAE's target of 5 million barrels per day of total production by 2027, and will significantly free the country from the Hormuz choke point. In other words, the UAE will gain the chance to divert a huge portion of its oil completely away from Iran's range and blackmail. Even in a scenario where war drums are beating, they will have the luxury of channeling nearly 3/4 of the black gold they produce directly to the Indian Ocean without ever putting it into the mine-infested waters of the strait. This means freeing Iran's biggest geopolitical hostage. For years, Tehran has tried to bring the world and the Gulf into line with the threat, "I will close Hormuz." With this second bypass route, Iran's strategic blackmail is significantly reduced against the UAE. One of the most important advantages of this bypass line is its ability to pump oil uninterrupted to Asian markets. Not only the giant refineries in China and India, but also energy-hungry Asian giants like Japan and South Korea will now be able to dock directly at Fujairah without having to price in the Hormuz risk. With this move, the UAE is not just building a pipeline, it is seizing the monopoly on Middle East energy supply security from Tehran's hands. Consider that 20% of global oil trade normally has to pass through this narrow strait. However, with the UAE's second move, this narrow passage on the map seems to be turning from a commercial necessity into merely a geographical crisis detail. The Abu Dhabi administration is securing billions of dollars in revenue by guaranteeing the flow of Murban crude oil to Asia. If one day mines explode in Hormuz and giant tankers catch fire, the UAE economy wants to escape with only a minor scratch. Moreover, when Fujairah Port's enormous 18 million cubic meter storage and blending facilities become fully integrated with this new pipeline, the UAE also aims to increase its power to balance market prices and control supply. This port, the UAE's only Indian Ocean gateway, became the biggest lifeline for global energy supply during the 2026 crisis, selling 7.4 million cubic meters of marine fuel alone in 2025. It has already proven itself as the indispensable stop for all global fleets on the Asia-Africa route. With this move, the UAE is not only saving itself by securing the route to Asian markets, it is gaining an economic independence that allows it to dictate its own production regime independent of OPEC quotas. Saudi Arabia's grand strategy: the land bridge and petroline. However, the logistics, revolution, and bypass route construction in the Gulf are not happening only within the borders of the Emirates. The Riyadh administration is ruthlessly deploying the largest transportation and logistics strategy in its history under Vision 2030 to prevent the Hormuz crisis from turning into a regional disaster. The Saudi Land Bridge project is not just a line connecting two seas on a map, it is an engineering marvel that carries the backbone of the global supply chain to the heart of the Middle East. This is not merely a railway, it is a giant bypass dagger stabbed into the heart of global logistics. The 9 main ports, managed with flawless strategy by the Saudi Ports Authority, are being interlocked with this railway network, turning Saudi Arabia into an impregnable commercial fortress. From Jeddah to Dammam, from King Abdullah Port to Jubail, all critical points are being connected with a giant iron network. These ports are not randomly selected. The enormous container traffic of Jeddah Islamic Port and Jubail's heavy industry products will move from sea to sea within hours, crossing the main 950 kilometers line between them. This new steel corridor, which reaches a total of 1,500 kilometers with its extensions, directly targets Hormuz, and its cost reaches exactly $26.6 billion. This astronomical figure proves that the project is not a simple freight train line, but a geopolitical shield built against Iran. With this line at full operational capacity, more than 50 million tons of cargo per year will be transported safely from east to west without ever calling at Hormuz. Global shipping giants like MSC have already started using this route. While this frightens countries like Kuwait and Qatar that have no bypass options, it makes Saudi Arabia the new untouchable fortress of global trade. Giant freight trains advancing at 160 kilometers per hour will reduce the weeks-long sea voyages of tankers which carry attack risks to just hours. As confirmed by project leaders, this bypass route will provide enormous transportation savings of $4.2 billion per year and give the economy a breath of fresh air. Moreover, it will create more than 200,000 new jobs for the Saudi economy and become the biggest logistics lifesaver of the post-oil era. This land-based logistics bridge, safe against asymmetric attacks coming from the sea, is making Saudi Arabia the safest trade center between Asia and Europe. But trains are not Saudi Arabia's only trump card. The real underground dragon, the 1,200 kilometers petroline, forms the energy leg of this land bridge, creating a flawless bypass system. The black gold gushing from the giant fields in Abqaiq, considered among the world's highest quality oils, flows directly to Yanbu without ever entering Hormuz's ring of fire. During the 2026 crisis, the capacity of this line was increased to 7 million barrels per day. Even when Hormuz was closed, Saudi Arabia exported 5.9 million barrels of oil per day through this line, saving the world from the brink of a major crisis. If this line had not existed, global oil prices would have risen to astronomical levels, and Western economies would have experienced a complete collapse. In other words, petroleum is a steel artery through which Riyadh protects not only its own economy, but the entire global system from Iran's caprices. New vulnerabilities. The need for an iron shield. The picture is becoming quite clear. The Gulf countries are justified in seeking to bypass Hormuz for sea trade because Iran has used the strait as a blackmail tool for years. Especially the bombs raining down on the Gulf in 2026 proved how vital these bypass projects are. However, these multi-billion-dollar steel fortresses also bring brand new and much more complex security vulnerabilities. Tehran reads these bypass moves as a direct declaration of war against its regional hegemony and its blackmail power in Hormuz. Iranian generals know very well that on the day these alternative routes begin working at full capacity and safely, Tehran's empire of fear over the Gulf will officially collapse. Yet, the Tehran administration remains a very dangerous actor with its asymmetric warfare power. Its cheap but deadly Shahed drones and ballistic missiles constitute a constant threat to these giant infrastructure projects. Especially the Fateh and Zulfikar series ballistic missiles, with a range of 1,200 kilometers, have the potential to hit even Yanbu port on Saudi Arabia's Red Sea coast. Pipelines and railways are static targets, so protecting them is an almost impossible task from a military perspective. It is virtually impossible to defend every single meter of thousands of kilometers of steel lines against missiles coming from the air. For this reason, the Gulf countries must urgently protect these routes on which they have spent billions with much more sophisticated air defense systems. Although US origin Patriot or THAAD systems provide high-altitude defense, establishing a flawless network against low-flying drone swarms is essential. This makes it mandatory for the Gulf countries to build not only concrete and steel, but also a brand new, integrated, AI-supported, multi-layered air defense architecture to protect these infrastructures. Otherwise, these steel arteries that redraw the map could suddenly become targets of Iranian missiles one night. Learning from the May 4th attack, ensuring the security of these lines and oil facilities has become the #1 national security doctrine of the Gulf countries. Just as important as the construction of the bypass lines is their protection. Iran's missile and drone attack on Fujairah on May 4th served as a painful reminder to everyone. Since that day, defense strategies have changed radically. The UAE has become the country that adapted most quickly to this new reality. It is building a massive multi-layered air defense shield around Fujairah port and the new West-East pipeline. In addition to existing THAAD batteries, shorter-range Patriot PAC-3 systems have been activated. Especially new-generation electronic warfare systems and laser defense weapons, specially designed against low-flying Shahed-type drones, are being deployed. The UAE has taken measures not only on land, but also at sea. Unmanned surface vehicles and fast-attack boat fleets continuously patrol off Fujairah. Mine detection and destruction systems have been placed near port entrances. In addition, underground sensors and AI-supported surveillance cameras have been installed at critical pipeline points, giving automatic alarms in case of any abnormal movement. Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, has to protect a much wider geography. The 1,200 kilometers Petroline and the 1,500 kilometers land bridge railway network are extremely open targets for sabotage. For this reason, Riyadh has activated a new national defense program called the SHIELD Project. Within its scope, every critical pump station and manifold point on the pipeline is monitored 24/7 with high-resolution radars and thermal cameras. Additional Patriot and Skyguard air defense batteries have been deployed, especially to the Yanbu and Jubail regions. Saudi Arabia is also using the advanced Winglung series unmanned aerial vehicles received from China for patrol flights. joint Gulf defense and cybersecurity, both countries have taken a joint step. The Gulf Air Defense Network. The UAE and Saudi Arabia have begun integrating their air defense radars and early warning systems. Thus, a threat coming from one country is instantly transmitted to the other. US AWACS aircraft and satellite intelligence also support this joint network. The technology dimension is not neglected either. Both countries are rapidly strengthening their cyber defense capacities. The SCADA control systems of the pipelines are protected with new generation AI-based cybersecurity firewalls. The budget allocated to this area has been tripled after attack attempts at the beginning of 2026. Physical security measures have also been increased. Specially trained security units have been deployed in the desert regions through which the pipelines pass. These units are supported by drones and conduct uninterrupted patrols 24 hours a day. Concrete barriers, sensor-equipped fences, and hidden observation towers have been installed at critical points. The Gulf countries have also started thinking long-term. Even in the design phase of the new bypass lines, a security-oriented engineering principle is being applied. Pipelines are laid underground as much as possible. Pump stations are placed inside reinforced concrete shelters, and the new storage tanks in Fujairah are protected with special composite materials against missile strikes. These defense investments are not in vain. Iran's asymmetric threats are still very real. Cheap drones, ballistic missiles, and cyber attacks can come at any moment. However, the Gulf countries are now pursuing an active deterrent strategy instead of remaining passive in defense. They are not only protecting, but also showing that any attack will have a very heavy price. Conclusion: a new era in the Middle East. Ultimately, the oil flowing in the desert is no longer just an economic resource. It has become a matter of national pride and independence. The UAE and Saudi Arabia are not only laying pipes and rails on their journey to get rid of Hormuz, they are also surrounding those pipes and rails with an iron shield. Because if this defense network cannot be established, the multi-billion-dollar investments risk turning into giant scrap heaps burning in the middle of the desert. A new era is opening its doors in the Middle East. The Gulf countries are building not only infrastructure, but also a new strategic doctrine to escape the cycle of dependence and fear that has lasted for years. Neither the statements in Washington, nor the summits in Beijing, nor the threats in Tehran can determine their future. They are rewriting their own destiny with the steel pipes, rails, and defense shields laid with their own hands. So, where do you think this process will evolve? Will the steel and technology shields established by the Gulf permanently end the strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz in global energy trade? This issue is critical enough to directly affect all of us in the coming years.